Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've lived in this apartment building for 3 years now. It's a modest place with 6 units, nothing fancy, but it's home. There are parking spots on both sides of the building, 8 in total, with wide entrances that lead to the parking areas. The building sits on a quiet street, or at least it should be quiet except for one major issue. There's an elementary school just 2 houses down. When I first moved in, everything seemed perfect. The rent was reasonable, my neighbors were friendly, and I had a dedicated parking spot. What I didn't account for was the chaos that would unfold every school day, particularly at lunchtime. The morning drop-offs aren't too bad. Most kids arrive by bus or walk, and the parents who do drive typically use the roundabout in front of the school as intended. But lunchtime? That's when all hell breaks loose. My fiancé works nearby and comes home during his lunch hour. What should be a peaceful break has turned into daily confrontations with entitled parents who think our driveway is their personal parking space. They don't actually park in the driveway, they park directly in front of it, blocking our access. Usually it's 2 or 3 cars lined up, making it impossible for residents to get in or out. Every single day my fiancé has to go out and ask these parents to move. Their responses are always infuriating. My fiancé politely asked them to move because they're blocking our driveway. Some parents respond by asking if we can wait 5 minutes while they get their kid. Others claim we have enough space to leave the driveway anyway. And the worst ones simply ignore us completely, walking away as if they didn't hear a thing. It's not just our building either. They block driveways all along the street, turning what should be a simple task of coming or going from our homes into a frustrating ordeal. We've tried the diplomatic approach. Several times we called the school to report the issue. The school administrators would promise to remind parents about proper drop-off and pick-up etiquette, maybe send out an email or mention it in the newsletter, but nothing changed. After a frustrating Monday where my fiancé couldn't even leave for work after lunch because 3 different cars were blocking our exit, we'd finally had enough. I got on the phone with my neighbors and we developed a plan. 4 houses and 3 apartment blocks, including ours, called the local police department, one after the other, to report the illegal parking. The police were surprisingly receptive. They confirmed that blocking driveways was illegal, even for just a few minutes. On Tuesday, when it happened again, we all called back. The officer on the phone was even more enthusiastic this time. The officer told us they heard our concerns and instructed us to make sure our own cars weren't parked in front of our driveways, promising they would handle the situation. That night, the town posted a notice on their official page. Reminder to all parents: do not park in front of private driveways when picking up while dropping off your children. Violations will result in tickets. I smiled when I read it, knowing what was coming. Wednesday was Judgment Day. At lunchtime, 2 police cars arrived and strategically positioned themselves to block anyone from leaving the street. The officers had come prepared with stacks of infraction tickets. What happened next was better than I could have imagined. Every single car that was even slightly blocking a driveway got flagged down. The officers were thorough, checking each driveway and issuing tickets to offenders. Parents tried to argue, but the police weren't having it. One parent protested that they were only going to be there for a minute, but the officer simply explained it was still illegal parking and handed them their ticket. Another parent complained about the ridiculousness of the situation and asked where they were supposed to park. The officer explained that the roundabout was designed for drop-offs, or they could use any legal street parking that didn't block driveways. The whole process took over an hour because they wouldn't let anyone leave until everyone had received their ticket and a stern reminder about parking laws. I watched from my window, trying not to look too gleeful. Today, Thursday, was a different story. The police had warned us they'd be back, and they were. An officer actually parked in our driveway, with permission of course, to supervise the lunchtime pickup. Miraculously, not a single parent blocked any driveway on our street. Word had clearly spread fast. Before leaving, the officer stopped by to chat. The officer suggested that if the problem happened again, we should take a picture and email it to him. He explained that a photo would be solid proof and admitted that in their small town, catching people breaking the law was the highlight of their day. I thanked him profusely. For the first time in months, we could come and go from our own home without having to confront entitled parents who thought their convenience trumped our right to access our property. Teaching has always been my passion. For 30 years, I dedicated my life to my students, watching them grow and learn. When multiple sclerosis forced me into early retirement, it was devastating, but I was determined not to let it define me. The incident happened during my weekly trip downtown. I still volunteer at a literacy center on Tuesdays, something that keeps me connected to teaching in some way. The weather that day was miserable. A light, persistent rain that wasn't heavy enough for an umbrella, but enough to make everything damp and uncomfortable. I arrived at the bus stop on Main Street during rush hour. It was crowded as usual. I maneuvered my wheelchair into the designated accessible area, which is really just a slightly wider section of the sidewalk near the bus stop sign. As I positioned myself, I noticed a woman glaring at me. She was probably in her 40s, expensively dressed with that "I want to speak to the manager" haircut. At first, I ignored her. After years of dealing with strangers' reactions to my wheelchair, I've learned to pick my battles. But then she started loudly sighing and muttering to herself while looking pointedly in my direction. Finally, she approached me. She rudely told me that I was taking up the entire covered area and that some people didn't want to get wet. I looked around confused. I was only occupying the space designated for wheelchairs. I apologized but explained that this was the accessible space and I needed to be here to board the bus. She responded dismissively, saying it was barely raining and suggesting I could move elsewhere, adding insensitively that it's not like I would get any wetter than everyone else. I noticed a group of high school students nearby, and a couple of them had their phones out, apparently recording our interaction. I said I had the right to use this space and pointed out that the bus would arrive soon, which would create plenty of room for everyone. The woman boasted about how expensive her outfit was, claiming it cost more than my wheelchair. She complained about having an important meeting and not wanting to show up looking like a drowned rat. I took a deep breath. After 30 years of teaching teenagers, I had plenty of practice staying calm. I told her that I understood her concern about her appearance but explained that didn't give her the right to ask me to move from the accessible space. She dismissed my response, accusing you people of always playing the disability card and calling me entitled. At this point, one of the high school students stepped closer and told the woman to leave me alone, pointing out that I wasn't bothering anyone. The woman snapped at the student to mind their own business, referring to me dismissively as wheelchair lady. I could see the bus approaching in the distance, and I hoped this confrontation would end soon. Instead, it escalated. The woman announced that if I wouldn't move, she would just have to stand right there. She squeezed next to me deliberately, bumping my wheelchair with her bag. I tried to adjust my position, but there wasn't much room. I asked her to please be careful as she could make my wheelchair roll. She told me not to be so dramatic. The bus was getting closer now, just a block away. Suddenly, the woman's phone rang. She answered it, speaking loudly. On the phone, she complained to someone that she was on her way, but an inconsiderate person in a wheelchair was hogging all the space at the bus stop. She assured the caller she wouldn't be late and would be there soon. As she ended the call, she looked even more agitated. The bus was now pulling up to the stop. She blamed me for making her late, her voice sharp with anger. And then it happened so fast. She turned and deliberately pushed my wheelchair hard. I felt myself rolling backwards straight toward the street where the bus was approaching. I couldn't reach my wheels fast enough to stop. I heard gasps and shouts. The bus driver must have seen what was happening because there was a screech of brakes. My wheelchair stopped abruptly as the bus halted just feet away. Everything after that was chaos. The high school students rushed forward, surrounding the woman when she tried to walk away. One student yelled that she couldn't leave, stating they saw what she did and had it all on video. Someone had called 911, and within minutes, police and an ambulance arrived. The paramedics checked me over, while the police questioned witnesses and reviewed the videos the students had taken. The woman desperately claimed that I had rolled myself into the street and that she had barely touched me. She accused me of making up the story for attention, but the videos told a different story. The police arrested her right there, handling her remarkably gently despite her continued protests and accusations. As they took her statement, one of the officers looked at me strangely. He asked if we both worked in the Centennial Building, in different companies but the same building. That's when I realized why she had seemed vaguely familiar. She worked for the marketing firm on the third floor. I remembered now she had complained multiple times about the wheelchair ramp installed at the side entrance, claiming it ruined the building's aesthetic and was rarely used anyway. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was charged with attempted assault, and I later learned she was fired from her job when the video went viral. Serves her right. Growing up was rough. My parents divorced when I was little, and my dad remarried fast. From the start, my stepmother made it clear I wasn't part of her picture. She doted on my younger sister. But me, I got the cold shoulder, sharp words, and the feeling that I was just extra baggage she wished didn't exist. The breaking point came when I was 11. I have epilepsy, a condition I've battled my entire life. During a church event, I had a seizure in the middle of the service. Instead of helping me, my stepmother was more concerned about how it made her look. The preacher called her out for neglecting me during a medical emergency, and guess who she blamed? Me, an 11-year-old having a seizure. After the service, she pulled me aside and accused me of embarrassing her. She complained that the preacher now thought she was a terrible mother. I just stared at her and told her that I hadn't chosen to have a seizure. She retorted that I could have warned her it was coming and claimed that I had ruined everything. After my dad passed away when I was 18, I cut old ties with her. 6 years of peace followed, until last month when she suddenly decided she needed to reconnect with me. It started with messages through mutual acquaintances saying she had changed, wanted to apologize, and needed closure. I ignored them all. My medical issues had flared up again. My epilepsy was worse, and I needed surgery for a brain tumor. The last thing I needed was her drama. Then came the bombshell. My neurologist discovered that my epilepsy wasn't just genetic bad luck, it was likely caused by my biological father's heavy drug use during my conception. Meth had literally altered my genetics. I was devastated learning I was defective from birth and that I shouldn't have children because of the high risk of passing it on. I texted my close friend about the news, and we agreed to meet at the local cafe for some comfort food and tea. I needed the support. We were sitting there, me sipping my matcha boba tea, when suddenly a familiar voice called out. My ex-stepmother exclaimed with surprise at seeing me and mentioned how long it had been. Before I could react, she rushed over to our table, arms outstretched for a hug. My body went rigid. She explained that she'd been trying to reach me. She mentioned her rehab program required her to make amends with people she'd hurt, and I was the last one on her list. She insisted we needed to talk about what happened. My friend intervened, telling her it wasn't a good time and that I didn't want to speak with her. My ex-stepmother protested that she had changed and was sober now. She claimed she deserved a chance to apologize. The word deserve triggered something in me. My heart raced, my vision narrowed, and I felt the familiar aura of an oncoming seizure. I coldly told her that she deserved nothing from me. She responded indignantly, asking about all she did for me and claiming she raised me. I accused her of abusing me, calling me an abomination, and blaming me for her mistakes. She defended herself by saying she was sick then but better now, and that my father would want us to reconcile. That was the last thing I heard before collapsing. I had a full seizure right there on the cafe floor. I later found out she didn't even help. She just stood there complaining about how I was, always doing this for attention. I woke up in the emergency room. My boyfriend was there holding my hand. He asked if I was okay and mentioned that my friend had told him what happened. I told him that she had found me after all these years just to clear her conscience. He told me that she'd been harassing my uncle and sister too, trying to find me, I explained that she didn't care about me and just wanted to feel better about herself. The next day, my phone blew up with messages from unknown numbers, her family members telling me I was being cruel by not letting her apologize. Even her mother called saying I was holding on to childhood grudges. After days of harassment, I finally snapped. I wrote a detailed social media post tagging everyone involved. To clarify for everyone, I am not obligated to help my abuser feel better about herself. Her need for closure does not trump my need for peace and health. I have a brain tumor, severe epilepsy, and her presence literally triggered a seizure. Her rehab program doesn't get to use me as a checkbox for her recovery. My forgiveness is not owed to someone who has never truly acknowledged the damage she caused. Stop contacting me. The messages stopped after that, but I heard that she was playing the victim, telling everyone I was mentally unstable and making up stories. Last week, I received a certified letter. It was from her rehab counselor asking if I would participate in a mediated reconciliation session. At the bottom, she had scrawled a note saying she needed this to complete her program and asking me to please help. I tore it up and mailed the pieces back. My medical issues are enough to deal with. I'm focusing on my surgery and my recovery. My boyfriend, my sister, who finally understands, and my true friends are the only support system I need. The audacity of some people to think their redemption story matters more than the trauma they caused is astounding. Her sobriety is her journey, not mine. My healing is mine, not hers. At 24, I've managed to land a job as a news producer at a respected station several hours away from where I grew up. It's fast-paced, challenging, and exactly what I need to keep moving forward in life. But lately, my phone has been ringing more frequently, with a caller I've been trying to distance myself from. My adoptive mother. When I was 6 years old, I was adopted by a woman who is now 65. At the time, everyone praised her for her selfless act of taking in a child. What they didn't see was what happened behind closed doors. While she maintained a stellar reputation among her friends as this generous, kind-hearted soul, my reality was quite different. Most of my childhood memories involved babysitters watching me while she was living it up with her friends. I struggled socially at school and became a target for bullies. When the school suggested therapy, she reluctantly agreed, but always dismissed any suggestion that our relationship might be contributing to my issues. Whenever I tried to talk about feeling neglected, she would dismiss my concerns, saying it was all in my head. She would remind me that she gave me a home when no one else would, and suggest that I should show some gratitude. I spent years believing there was something fundamentally wrong with me. It took moving away and finding a compassionate therapist to help me understand that what I experienced was emotional abuse and neglect. Fast forward to last Sunday when I received a call that would disrupt the delicate peace I've built for myself. When I answered the phone, my mother told me she wasn't feeling right. She described feeling dizzy and sweating and insisted something was wrong. Despite our strained relationship, basic human concern kicked in, and I called emergency services for her. They transported her to the hospital, where they discovered she had a small ulcer that had caused minor bleeding. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to warrant monitoring. Her best friend of 36 years drove an hour to be with her, and I've been in regular communication with the hospital. The doctors explained that her condition was largely due to stress, poor diet, and lack of exercise. All things her friends and I have warned her about countless times. Yesterday, I called to check on her progress. When I asked how she was feeling, she complained about everything. She said she felt terrible, complained about the uncomfortable hospital beds and inedible food. She lamented that nobody listened to her and expressed her wish that I was there instead of all these strangers. I tried to focus on the positive, mentioning that the doctor said she was improving, but she rejected this good news. She insisted she wouldn't go home until she felt completely better and claimed they couldn't make her leave. Her friend called me later that evening. My mother's friend told me that my mother was refusing to cooperate with her discharge planning. She explained that the doctor said my mother could go home with some medication, but my mother was insisting she wouldn't leave until she felt completely better. I pointed out that this wasn't realistic, reminding her that my mother was 65, not 25. The friend agreed with me. She mentioned she had tried telling my mother that she needed to push herself a bit, but my mother wasn't listening. She also added that she could only stay until Monday before needing to get back to her own life. That's when I realized what was happening. This wasn't just about her health anymore, this was another manipulation tactic. She was creating a situation where I would feel obligated to come, rescue her, and take care of her indefinitely. What she doesn't understand is that I have my own serious health issues I'm trying to manage. My job is already high stress, and the thought of taking unpaid leave to move back and care for someone who never properly cared for me is overwhelming. The irony is that she has so much support available. Her best friend is staying for several more days. My godfather and his friend are planning to visit. Her neighbors have repeatedly offered assistance. She's surrounded by people willing to help. Yet somehow, she has convinced herself that only I can provide what she needs. This morning, I received a text from her. In her message, she asked when I was coming home. She said she needed me there and claimed nobody else understood what she needed. She insisted this was what family does. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. In my reply, I explained that I could not leave my job and health treatments to come stay with her indefinitely. I reminded her that she had friends and neighbors willing to help. I mentioned that the doctors said she was improving and she would have a prescription to manage her symptoms. I suggested that if she needed additional care, the hospital could refer her to a rehabilitation clinic. She responded by accusing me of abandoning her when she needed me most. She invoked that familiar phrase about everything she's done for me. That phrase, everything I've done for you, has been weaponized against me my entire life, as if providing the basic necessities while emotionally neglecting a child deserves eternal gratitude and servitude. I responded by clarifying that I wasn't abandoning her. I explained that I was recognizing she had adequate support in place and that my presence wasn't necessary for her recovery. I emphasized that I needed to maintain the boundaries I've set for my own well-being. She replied with a passive-aggressive message saying she would just suffer alone and telling me not to worry about her. My brother, who rarely involves himself in these situations, texted me shortly after. He asked what was going on with our mother, relaying that she claimed I was refusing to help her. I explained the situation briefly, that she had a minor ulcer, was improving, and had multiple people available to help her. I mentioned that she wanted me to leave my job and health treatments to come stay with her indefinitely. He asked if I couldn't just take a few days off. I responded by asking why he couldn't do the same. He didn't respond to that. The truth is, I've spent most of my life trying to earn the love and approval of someone who was incapable of providing it. I've sacrificed my own needs repeatedly, only to be told it wasn't enough. I'm finally at a point where I recognize that this cycle isn't healthy, and I have the strength to break it. I'm not being cruel by refusing to drop everything and run to her. I'm acknowledging that her request isn't reasonable, especially given the circumstances and our history. I'm choosing to support her in ways that don't require me to sacrifice my own well-being. Maybe someday my mother will understand that relationships are about mutual respect and care, not obligation and guilt. Until then, I'll continue to maintain my boundaries while still ensuring she has the support she needs, just not exclusively from me. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.